Good evening. Today is April 5th. It was another amazing day for the markets after the jobs report on Friday. S&P 500 didn't even pause after crossing 4,000 and was up today another 1.5%, making yet another new highs. Russell 2000 was up only a little over 0.5%, underperforming the broad markets. And NASDAQ was up over 2%. Victor, are you still holding your position in NASDAQ or have you sold it yet? That was quite a precious call.
I was lucky, very lucky. I think it's good not to. A good trader never admits to a profit, and he never indicates when he has a position, because it's very dysfunctional to listeners, because obviously I'm going to get out of it before I turn bearish with any listeners. And like Soros, I can't go on television to talk my position, but it's bad karma to hype your position along. And the market is incredibly strong, that's for sure. Continue.
Oil was down a little over 4% today, and Bitcoin is still struggling to cross 60,000. It's been toying with the number for days now, but yet it just can't jump over it. And Yellen today was saying that she strongly doubts that stimulus would cause inflation pressures, as multiple reports came out this morning saying that we have inflation pressures already, but she thinks they will be transitory. And she also going to use her first major address as Treasury Secretary to argue for a global minimum corporate tax rate. She said she is working with the G20 nations to agree to some global tax minimum so that people, or corporations rather, can stop avoiding the taxes by moving to another country. What I don't understand, how the G20 is going to help if they could just move to the country, another 300 countries outside of the G20. Interesting today, the CBS News in 60 Minutes was bashing our favorite Governor DeSantis in Florida here for making up some story about pay for play narrative that he gave vaccine distribution rights to Publix because they donated to his campaign. And then they blatantly edited the clip in which he had a perfectly reasonable explanation for that and put him in a bad light. But of course, I live in Florida and Publix is everywhere. It's definitely one of the most often visited stores and one of the most convenient locations to have a vaccine distribution center. So there is obviously no story here, but CBS knows that he's probably a viable contender for the elections for president, so they want to smear him preemptively. Meanwhile, they haven't even covered the nursing home scandal with governor in New York. So, Victor, what else have you seen that was so woke to keep the market?
I don't think the listeners want to hear my litany of how the country is falling apart. But I will say that we've had one of the greatest continuous rises in history. We're up 120 S&P points, probably 1,200 Dow points in 4 days. Then four continuous rises of more than 10 each day, counting Friday as a rise. Up 6% in the S&P and up 6% in the NASDAQ. And it's only happened once or twice before, and that's been bearish. I'm idiosyncratic. I think that a terrible thing is for baseball to be sinking. It was already at a low in terms of viewership,
Right.
had been eclipsed by basketball and football. Almost all the people who watch baseball go to baseball because it's a refuge from politics. Sports is supposed to be recreation and take them away from politics, and they don't want to be propagandized in the sports thing. It's bad enough that they can't root for their regular fans, but in general, when baseball is way down, it's not good for the market. And we're having a little arms race now. The president indicates that he'd be happy if the All-Star game and the draft was moved from Atlanta. So then the president of baseball moves it, and then Trump, in his typical way, says we should boycott the woke companies the same way they're boycotting baseball. So he wants to take vengeance against Delta and Coke. So what will be then, of course, the politicians in Atlanta don't want to see it lose all that money from it being taken away. We have a real arms race with, can it go further? Well, if the 50% that isn't woke boycotts the other side, then there's a lot of progressive news in Minneapolis. All the cars are being stopped. They don't honk their horn. They're being swarmed on. It only takes a little bit for there to be a change in the group think. Aside from the continuous rise and the decline of baseball, those are my only two reasons for being bearish now. But of course,
Well, let me ask you about another reason.
you know,
Obviously everybody heard about the collapse of Archegos capital and of them losing over $100 billion using 5, 6, 7 times leverage, depending on who you ask.
all those things is very interesting that they lost all that. Okay, they lost billions, 10, $100 billion. Who took the other side of those positions? It had to be the top feeders. So they took 6% out of 50 or 100 billion. So
Well, it could be a prop desk at Goldman. If prime brokerage is selling those total return swaps to Archegos Capital, their trading desk, because they have Chinese wall, allegedly they don't talk to each other, their trading desk could have easily profited on the other side of the transaction.
well, allegedly we don't believe that Chinese walls are very difficult to surmount. In the old days, the investment bankers would play squash with the salesman, and I'd always say it just takes a wink, just takes
Right.
a nudge, and anyway, I think it's very appropriate. The top feed is forced the bulls out of 50, $100 billion of positions, and then they all, between them, they
Right.
all took the other side. And someone took the other side. I'm sure it wasn't only one of them. They all act together by an invisible hand for the banks, the big banks, and
Right,
they,
but it's also something to say for the centralized exchanges because they regulate the collateral. In this case, they use the same collateral multiple times with different prime brokers and nobody knew. So it's if it were a centralized exchange where they would have deposited that collateral,
there, there would have been a way for the there would have been a way for the banks and the prime brokers to make money, but whenever they force a a big holder out, um, they take the other side, and it's an opportunity for them to make
right.
unusual profits, and that's the way the market works. And it's good that it works that way.
But what's interesting now that I'm sure that all of those prime brokers are now reviewing every other account that they have on the books to make sure that those are properly capitalized. And given that,
Why do they have to do that? It just was a boom for them. They were able to make, there was $100 billion, as you say, that they had to buy at the lows. They bought it, and it's been ever since they've been talking about that. The market's gone up every day, and it's up 6 or 7%. And one of the I only find two occasions that it's ever done this for, both bearish. What's happening on the scientific front? Is Dr. Cattle making trying to create lockdowns everywhere?
well, what else is he gonna do, right? That's why, they're trying to create all of those scary stories about DeSantis because they just can't see how great Florida is doing and they just can't let it go. They need to create some sort of distress in the state.
Yes, and I think I'm still watching every day what the presidential odds are, and it's now about 60% that the Democrats will be the next president in 2024. And
Right.
Kamala Harris is she's only 4% ahead of Biden. Of course, you were talking about progressive news and a lot of news about Hunter Biden. He has a beautiful biography out, and it has wanted me, says the laptop could have been his, but it could have been Russian disinformation. You would think that some lawyer would be there who would cross-examine him. I've never seen a more wishy-washy defense. There are about 1,000 emails that went to other people that verify specific actions that were taken during that time. I mean, how can a person get away with denying? He says, "Well, it might have been mine. It might have been mine." Amazing that the president calls him every day. The president, when he gets off the, I don't know if he calls him while he's on the Amtrak or afterwards, but they talk every day, and it's amazing that they talk every day, but not once do they mention anything about his business transactions. course, the infrastructure bill is tied in intimately with creating more unionization for the service employees union. There has to be all the home workers who are going to receive $250 billion have to be guaranteed that they'll be able to collective bargain, and the collective bargaining will be through their favorite union. That's one of the major contributors to the Progressive Party. So that's going on. That's part of the arms race, and but we can all thank the former president for this. If he hadn't been so self-aggrandizing in between the election and the Georgia election, if the Georgia Democrats hadn't won two seats, then there'd be instead of talking about an increase in corporate taxes of 40%, there'd be no corporate tax increase. Anyway, it's all falling apart. But as we've said many times, the worse it gets, the more terrible the outlook, the better for the stock market. It's incredible, as we said on Friday. It's amazing that the stock market could go up during the pandemic. It could go up when the progressives won the election. It could go up when the Secretary of the Treasury is gunning for increases in taxes on corporations. No matter what, it's great. It can go up when baseball is going to. There was I saw about 50 responses to the baseball being moved. They all said they were going to stop watching baseball, stop going to the baseball. And baseball is sort of the typical American game. It's from a farm to a city, and it has a history of 150 years, and there's no definite time period when it ends. And I imagine that 90% of the people that watch the Black Lives Matter and signs in all the basketball arenas, that compares to probably 90% of all the baseball fans are older. They're probably 20 years older. So we still have a great country. I recommend the Bourgeois Virtues by Deidre McCloskey. Talks about all the good things in America. There are still 80 million bird watchers and 5 million in the book clubs, and tremendous number of singers, not only the barbershop quartets, but all the singing groups. So we still have a great country, but
it's getting more and more divided every day.
That's right. We have a president who's the most unity that we've ever had, but apparently that's good for the market. But
all this leverage worry you? Because
No, it doesn't leverage. It doesn't.
we have the highest leverage pretty much in the system we've ever had, on off balance sheet, retail, institutional, same collateral used multiple times. I'm sure other places do that as well. Options, NFTs, SPACs, across the board, the leverage is so high, so that make the systemic risk, the counterparty risk, the concentration risk very high. So
We've had 4 20-day highs in a row. We've had all-time highs, one after another. When we have a series of all-time highs, it's bullish. There's always a risk. It's always a negative. There are a lot of negatives in the air right now. The fact that the Treasury Secretary is unanimously and stridently striving for increased taxes. That's a negative, but those negatives are, and the fact that the percentage bullish is at a high. What's your view about GameStop?
well, they have just issued shares and the stock initially sold off and now it's unchanged, pretty much down 2% or something.
Well, I think it's good that they
Right.
they have a book value of $15, and they're selling stock at $170, and their sales are going up again, and reminds me of Tandy that had all the Radio Shack stores. They had about as many as GameStop, and or the malls. Eventually, people stop going to things that are out of date. Perhaps baseball is one of them, and we may not like that, but that could be very good for the market. Anyway, the government to me is bearish. The weather gauge now is negative as far as I'm concerned, but any views of that aren't bullish and goes against the 50,000 full century gain, and after 1 or 2 declines, I'll turn back to bullish again. But I've been wrong before. I've been lucky in the last few days. It's time for me to be unlucky. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Victor. Have a great evening.